AITA for ignoring my brothers after they abandoned me while I was in foster care. When I was 10 years old, my mother passed away. It was sudden, and there was not really time to understand what was happening. One day she was there, and the next she was not. It was a car accident. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting room while the nurses spoke in hushed tones. My brothers, Caleb and Miles, were there too, but they did not seem as upset as I was. Maybe because they were older, or maybe because they had already started drifting away from our family by then. Caleb was 23 and absorbed in his new corporate job. And Miles, 19, was starting college at a state university. As for me, I was just a child, and suddenly everything I knew about stability and family had disappeared. At the funeral, I expected my brothers to take charge. After all, Caleb had his own apartment in the city, and Miles was sharing a dorm room with some friends. I thought one of them would take me in, or at least offer to, but instead, I caught them talking about arrangements. That is how I learned I was not going to live with either of them. The social worker from Child Protective Services who arrived the following week confirmed it. She was kind, but all I could think about was that my brothers did not want me. They had excuses, of course. Caleb said he was not ready to be a full-time guardian. Miles claimed he could not handle both his studies and raising a child. At the time, I did not know what to say. I was just a scared kid who had just lost his mother. But the way they avoided eye contact while talking to me said it all. They were not interested in this responsibility. I was sent into the foster care system without ceremony. Caleb signed some papers, tapped me on the shoulder, and said he would come see me. Spoiler alert, he never did. Foster care was a mixed bag. I ended up landing with a decent family eventually, but it took time. My first placement was with a family that seemed to see me as a source of income from the state stipend. They did not mistreat me physically, but they were distant. Meals were served on time. The fridge was full, but the house always felt cold. My foster parents only spoke to me when necessary, and they had two older children who made it very clear that I was not part of their little family. I spent most of my time alone sitting in my room with my mother's old photo album. It was one of the few things I had managed to take with me. The phone calls started a few months after my placement. At first, I was happy to hear from Caleb and Miles. I thought they regretted their decision and were going to change their minds, but the calls were awkward. They asked mundane questions like how school was going or if I was eating well. Then there were long silences. They never really listened to my answers. After a while, I no longer looked forward to their calls. It seemed like they were calling out of obligation, not because they genuinely cared about me. Once, when I was 12, I gathered my courage and asked Caleb why he had not taken me in. He sighed as if I were being unreasonable and replied that he was starting his career and it just was not the right time. Miles gave me a similar excuse when I asked him. He said he did not know how to raise a child and it would not have been fair to either of us. At the time, I did not know how to respond, but their words stayed with me. It was not a question of fairness. It was simply that they did not want me. Over the years, I learned to expect nothing from my family. The calls became increasingly rare, going from once a month to a few times a year. I stopped trying to invest myself and gave short answers to their questions. I would tell them school was fine and that I did not need anything. Eventually, they stopped calling completely, and I did not care. By 15, I harbored a deep resentment toward them. All of them, my brothers, my aunts, my uncles. They were all the same. They had not cared about me when it really mattered. So why should I care about them? The foster family I arrived at when I was 14 was better. They were not perfect, but they did their best. My foster mother, Mrs. Whitman, was patient, and Mr. Whitman treated me like one of his own kids. They had two younger children, and even though we were not very close, they did not treat me like an intruder. For the first time in years, I felt a certain stability. I stayed with them until I was 18, and I am grateful for what they did for me. But despite everything, I could not get rid of the bitterness I felt toward my real family. At every holiday, every birthday, I wondered why no one had fought for me, why no one had thought I was worth the effort. When I turned 20, I decided it was over. My brothers had tried to reconnect a few times, but I ignored their calls. I wanted neither their apologies nor their justifications. I was tired of being the child they had abandoned. So, I packed my bags, left town, and told no one where I was going. I did not even leave a note. I wanted a fresh start, a life where I would not be defined by what my family had done or not done. Starting over was not easy, but it was worth it. I moved to a new city, found a job, and started building my own life. I did not tell my whole story. When people asked about my family, I simply said we were not close. Then I changed the subject. It was simpler that way. No one needed to know about the years spent feeling like I was not good enough. Looking back, I do not know if I will ever forgive my brothers. Maybe they thought they were doing what was right, or maybe they were just selfish. Regardless, they made their choice and I made mine. All I knew was that I was no longer going to let their negligence define me. For the first time in years, I had control over my own life, and that was enough for me. Starting from scratch at 20 was both liberating and terrifying. I put everything I owned into a worn duffel bag and took a bus to a city I had only seen on television. I knew no one there, but that was exactly the point. I wanted a blank slate, a place where no one would know me as the kid who was left behind. I did not really have a plan, just enough money to last a few weeks and the vague idea that I would figure it out as I went along. The first few months were hard. I lived in a cheap motel while looking for work, eating mostly instant ramen and stretching every dollar. I did odd jobs, washing dishes, unloading trucks, cleaning offices, anything that allowed me to survive. I barely slept, partly because of the noise at the motel, but mostly because I kept wondering if I had made the right choice. Was it stupid to cut ties with everyone and start over? But every time I thought about contacting my brothers, I remembered those awkward calls, their excuses, and how they had let me down when I needed them most. That was enough to keep me going. Finally, things started to improve. I landed a job at a small cafe, the kind of place where the regulars know your first name and leave crumpled dollar bills as tips. The pay was not extraordinary, but it was stable, and the owner, Mrs. Desai, took a liking to me. She reminded me a bit of Mrs. Whitman, my last foster mother. Kind but straightforward, she would nag me to eat more vegetables and stay on the straight and narrow, which I secretly appreciated. It had been a long time since anyone cared enough about me to act that way. Working at the cafe brought me a sense of stability I had not felt in years. I started making friends with some regulars like Elliot, who ran the bookstore next door, and Sophia, a student who always came in with her nose buried in a textbook. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I belonged to a community. No one asked me questions about my past, and I offered no details. They simply knew me as the guy who made incredible lattes and always had a joke ready. That was enough for me. At 22, things got even better. That was when I met Madeline. She walked into the cafe on a rainy afternoon, soaked to the bone and looking like she was having the worst day possible. Her umbrella had broken and she was late for a meeting, but she still stopped to order a chai latte. When I handed it to her, she smiled and thanked me for not judging her appearance. I laughed and told her she was the best-dressed soaked person I had seen all day. She rolled her eyes, but I could tell she was amused. After that, Madeline started coming in more often, and very quickly, we were chatting every time she stopped by. She was 30, a bit older than me, and worked as a graphic designer. She had this quiet confidence, as if she knew exactly who she was and did not care what others might think. It was refreshing, especially after spending a large part of my life trying to prove myself to people who did not care anyway. After a few weeks, I found the courage to ask her out on a date. To my surprise, she said yes. Our first date was simple. We got burgers from a food truck and walked in the park. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about her childhood, an only child with adoring parents, and her dream of traveling around the world. I told her about my job at the cafe and my dream of opening my own place one day. I did not tell her much about my family. Instead, I simply said we were not close and left it at that. Madeline did not press, which I appreciated. She seemed to understand that I was not ready to talk about it, and she respected that, at least at the beginning. Our relationship moved quite fast. After a year together, we were already talking about moving in together. I had saved enough to leave the motel and rent a tiny apartment, but Madeline's apartment was nicer. So, I ended up moving in with her. At first, it was strange living with someone so close to her family. Her parents called her every few days just to chat, and she told them everything: what we ate, the movies we watched, even insignificant details like the new coffee shop we had tried. I was not used to that kind of transparency. My reflex had always been to keep things to myself. Madeline was patient with me. She invited me to family dinners and holidays like Thanksgiving. And even though I felt like an outsider at first, Her parents did everything to make me feel comfortable. Her father was the type to strike up a conversation with anyone, and her mother always prepared enough food to feed an army. It was nice, but at the same time, it made me a little uncomfortable, as if I were glimpsing something I had never had and probably never would. After a while, Madeline started bringing up the idea of me reconnecting with my family. She asked me one evening during dinner if I thought it would be nice to have them in my life again. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I told her not really. She looked surprised and reminded me that they were my family, as if that should explain everything. I told her I did not want to talk about it, and she dropped it. Or so I thought. Looking back, I think Madeline genuinely believed she was helping me. She had grown up in a tight-knit and caring family. So, I do not think she could understand why someone would want to cut ties with their own blood. For her, family was everything. For me, on the contrary, family was just a reminder of all the times I had been let down. For a while, everything was fine. Madeline no longer spoke about my family, and I let myself believe she had finally understood my point of view. We started talking about the future, marriage, children, maybe even buying a house one day. I felt like we were building something solid, something I could count on. For the first time, I told myself that maybe I had finally found my happy ending, but I was quickly going to learn that some things are not as solid as they seem. It all started with a text message. I did not recognize the number, so I almost ignored it. But curiosity took over and I opened it. The message said something like, "Hi, it's been a long time. I know this is out of the blue, but I would really like us to catch up." The name at the bottom of the message made my blood run cold. Caleb, my oldest brother. At first, I thought it was a mistake or spam. Caleb would not contact me after all these years, right? But reading the message again, it was clear he knew exactly who he was addressing. He mentioned things only my brother could know, details about our mother and the neighborhood where we grew up. My stomach knotted. How had he gotten my number? I stood there staring at the screen for a long time, hesitating to reply. Part of me wanted to throw my phone across the room. Another wanted to call him and scream at him. In the end, I did neither. I simply blocked the number. I thought that would be the end of the story. It was not. Later that evening, I mentioned it to Madeline. I told her she would never guess who sent me a text that day, trying to keep a neutral tone. She looked up from her computer, curious. When I told her it was Caleb, my brother, her reaction was not what I expected. Instead of surprise or concern, she gave me a strange, guilty look. She murmured that she was actually going to talk to me about that. I froze and asked her what she meant. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. She confessed that she had given him my number. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. I asked her why she would do that. She started to say she just thought that if I talked to him, I would realize it was not as terrible as I thought. She was now on the defensive. She said I had been holding on to this anger for so long, and she just wanted to help me move on. I retorted sharply, asking if she realized what she had done and telling her she had no right. Her face crumbled, but I did not care. I could not believe she had gone behind my back like that, especially after all the times I had explained to her how I felt about my family. I thought she understood. I thought she respected my boundaries. Obviously, I was wrong. She tried to explain herself, saying she only wanted to help me and had no bad intentions. But to me, her intentions did not matter. She had crossed a line, and I could not move past it. I finally told her I could not continue like this. Her eyes widened, and she asked if I was breaking up with her for this. I replied that it was not just this. It was the fact that she did not respect me enough to listen to me. I told her how I felt, and she went behind my back anyway. I said I could not be with someone who thinks they know better than I do what is good for my own life. She started to cry, which only fueled my anger. She sobbed that she was sorry and did not mean to hurt me, begging to talk about it so we could fix it. But I did not want to talk anymore. I had already said everything. I told her she needed to leave. I said she could take the time she needed, but I wanted her to go. She started crying even harder, begging me to reconsider my decision, but my mind was made up. Trust is essential in a relationship, and once it is broken, there is no going back. At least, not for me. The following days passed in a fog. Madeline moved out of the apartment, carrying her things box by box. I tried to avoid being present while she was packing. It was too painful to watch, even though I knew I had made the right decision. Her parents started calling me, which only made things worse. They left message after message on my voicemail, saying Madeline was heartbroken and did not understand why I was being so harsh. They claimed she had good intentions and did not deserve to be punished for a single mistake. But it was not a simple mistake. It was a betrayal of trust. And if they could not understand that, there was no point in trying to explain it. I blocked their number too. One evening, about a week after Madeline left, I was sitting on the couch staring at the empty space where her bookshelf used to be. I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief. Part of me missed her, but another part was relieved she was gone. I could not shake the feeling that this breakup was inevitable, that sooner or later her view of family and mine were bound to clash. Looking back, I think Madeline genuinely believed she was helping me. She thought she was fixing something broken, but what she did not understand is that some things do not need to be fixed. Some things just need to be left alone. I did not need to move on with my brothers. I did not need to forgive them or have a heart-to-heart discussion. All I needed was the peace that came from knowing I was in control of my own life. Madeline did not see that, and in the end, that is what drove us apart. After Madeline left, I thought things would calm down. I was wrong. In reality, the drama only intensified. Her parents continued to want to get involved. Even though I had blocked their number, they found ways to get messages to me. Once, they showed up at the cafe while I was working. I did not know they were there until Mrs. Desai came to the back and told me there was a couple asking for me who looked upset. My heart tightened. I already knew who it was. When I went out to the front, they were there. Madeline's mother and father looked like they had stepped straight out of a suburban family postcard. Her mother had tears in her eyes, and her father looked ready to lecture me. Her father said they just wanted to talk as soon as he saw me. I sighed and told them I was working, and this was neither the time nor the place. Her mother replied with a trembling voice that I did not really give them a choice because I blocked their numbers, and Madeline was devastated. She said I refused to even listen to her. I replied, trying to remain calm, that there was nothing to listen to, and she broke my trust. Her father took a step forward, obviously to intimidate me. He said I knew how much she was crying and that she made a mistake, but without any bad intentions. He insisted she cared about me and only wanted to help. I took a deep breath to contain the frustration rising within me. I told them I was sorry she was hurting, but that changed nothing about what happened. I said I clearly set my boundaries and she ignored them, and that was not something I could just forget. Her mother insisted, almost pleading, that I was throwing years of a relationship in the trash for a single incident. She said Madeline was in therapy trying to understand why she did that, and asked if that counted for anything. I replied that it changed nothing about what she did. I told them I needed them to leave immediately, and I would not discuss this further. Mrs. Desai must have sensed the tension because she came out from the back and told them gently but firmly that they had to leave. I felt bad that she had to intervene, but I was grateful she supported me. As he left, her father muttered something about me being cold and ungrateful. I simply shook my head and went back to work. But it was not over. Madeline herself started sending me letters. At first, I ignored them. I did not even open the first ones. I threw them directly into the trash. Then one day, curiosity got the better of me and I opened one. In this letter, she apologized again for what she had done. She said she regretted crossing my boundaries and wished she could go back. But she also persisted in her reasoning, claiming she still believed I needed to face my past. She wrote that she just wanted me to have a chance to heal, and she did not want to hurt me. Reading that letter made me even angrier than I would have thought. Her apology was not the problem. That, I could almost accept, but the way she continued to present things as if she knew better than I did what was good for my own life drove me crazy. She did not understand that her way of helping was exactly the opposite of what I needed. I did not reply to those letters. I saw no point. It was clear we would never agree on this, and dragging out the situation would only make things worse. I focused on work, on rebuilding my routine without her. Some days were easier than others. I occasionally thought about sending her a message or calling her just to see how she was doing. But I knew better. Once trust is broken, it is almost impossible to repair it. That was when my brother started trying to contact me more persistently. Blocking Caleb's number had not been enough. They found me on social media too. I had deleted my accounts years ago, but apparently, Caleb had involved Miles, and Miles was not blocked yet. I received a direct message from him that simply said they needed to talk. I deleted it without replying, but the message stayed in the back of my mind for days. What did he want? Why now? I could not shake the feeling that Madeline's interference had opened a door I had put so much effort into closing. It made me resent her all over again, even though I knew it was up to me to handle this now. Finally, I decided to send one last message to Miles. It was short and direct, stating I was not interested in a discussion and asking him to stop contacting me. I blocked him immediately after sending it. I thought that would be the end. I was wrong again. One evening, I was sitting in my apartment when there was a knock at the door. I was not expecting anyone, so I hesitated before opening. When I finally did, I was stunned to see Caleb on the doorstep. I asked him in an icy voice what he was doing there. He raised his hands as if surrendering and said he just wanted to talk. He asked if he could come in. I replied sharply that no, whatever he had to say, he could say it there. He looked surprised but nodded. He said he knew I was angry at Miles and him, and that he understood. He admitted they should have done more when Mom died, and that they messed up, but they were trying to fix it, and I kept pushing them away. I crossed my arms and asked why now, after they had 10 years to fix it. He hesitated and said they did not know how to reach me. He mentioned that Madeline contacted them and explained what happened, which made them think. He said they just wanted a chance to make things right. Hearing her name was like a punch in the gut. I said through clenched teeth that Madeline had no right to get involved, and he had no right to show up there uninvited. I reminded him I was clear that I did not want to talk to him. Caleb's face fell, but I did not care. He murmured that he was sorry and that he just missed his little brother. I replied that he should have thought of that before abandoning him. Then I slammed the door in his face. That night, I could not sleep. Seeing Caleb had brought memories I had tried to bury to the surface, memories of a scared and lonely child wondering why no one wanted him. It reminded me why I had cut ties in the first place. Some people do not deserve a second chance. After Caleb's visit to my door, I realized I had to make changes. Blocking numbers and ignoring messages was no longer enough. My family always found a way to come back, no matter how clear I was about not wanting anything to do with them anymore. I felt like I was always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next message or the next knock at the door. I hated that feeling, the feeling of not being fully in control of my own life. The first thing I did was talk to my landlord. I explained the situation, omitting certain details, and asked if it was possible to break the lease early. He was not thrilled, but after I offered to pay a month's rent as a penalty, he agreed. I started looking for a new place immediately, focusing on neighborhoods farther away, places where Caleb would probably not think to look for me. Within a week, I found a small studio apartment on the other side of town. It was not much, but it was mine, and most importantly, it was a fresh start. Packing boxes in the old apartment had a bittersweet taste. Even though I was eager to leave, that place had been my first real home after foster care. It was where I had started rebuilding my life piece by piece. It was where I had met Madeline, where I had believed for a time that I could finally have something stable. Leaving it meant turning a page in my life, a page that was both painful and full of hope in its own way. The move helped me more than I thought it would. Being in a new place with new surroundings gave me a sense of freedom I had not felt in a long time. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I threw myself into work, taking overtime shifts at the cafe and putting money aside for the future. Mrs. Desai noticed I was working more than usual and took me aside one day. She asked if I was okay, her eyes full of concern. I forced a smile and said yes, explaining that I was just trying to stay busy. She did not press, but I could tell she was not totally convinced. Still, her kindness meant a lot to me. It reminded me that not all relationships had to be complicated or painful. Some people simply care about others without ulterior motives. Madeline, of course, did not give up right away. Even after I moved, I received a few more letters from her, forwarded to my new address by the postal service. I did not even bother opening them. I knew that whatever she might say, it would change nothing. I had made my decision, and I was not going to question it. I kept telling myself that trust is the foundation of any relationship and that once broken, there is no return possible. It was not easy. However, some nights I stayed awake thinking back on the good times we shared, wondering if I had been too harsh. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. What she had done was not just a simple mistake. It was a fundamental lack of respect for who I was and for what I needed. As for my brothers, I heard nothing more after Caleb's visit. Whether they finally got the message or were simply waiting for the right time to try again, I did not know, and honestly, I did not care. The more time passed, the more I realized how much lighter I felt without them in my life. I no longer carried that anger and resentment, not because I had forgiven them, but because I had finally accepted that I did not need them. Their opinions, their attempts to guilt-trip me, their efforts to reconnect, none of that mattered anymore. I had stopped letting them have power over me. One day, about 6 months after my breakup with Madeline, I received an email from an old friend I had not spoken to in years. It was someone I had met during my time in foster care, a guy named Jaden. He was a few years older than me, and we had lost touch after he aged out of the system. Seeing his name in my inbox surprised me, but pleasantly. In his message, Jaden explained that he had recently moved to my city and was working as a mechanic. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee one of these days to catch up. I hesitated at first. Letting someone from my past back into my life seemed risky, especially after everything that had happened. But Jaden was neither like my brothers nor like Madeline. He knew what it was like to grow up without a safety net, to have to figure everything out alone. So, I replied and set a date. Seeing Jaden again was like diving back into a world I had almost forgotten. We talked for hours, sharing memories of our foster families and the trouble we got into as kids. He told me about his struggles finding stable work after leaving the system and how he had finally made it. I told him about my job at the cafe and my dream of opening my own place one day. At one point, Jaden leaned back in his chair and told me I had turned out good and that he was proud of me. That caught me off guard. I was not used to hearing that from anyone, let alone someone who knew the darkest aspects of my past. But it touched me deeply, much more than I could express. Over the following months, Jaden and I became very close again. Having someone who understood my past, who did not judge me and did not try to fix me, changed everything. He reminded me that family is not always about blood. It is also the people who are there for you when it really counts. With Jaden's encouragement, I started thinking seriously about my future. I had been saving for years, and even though I was still far from ready to open my own cafe, that dream no longer seemed as inaccessible as before. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something real, something that belonged entirely to me. Looking back, cutting ties with Madeline and with my brothers was one of the hardest decisions of my life, but also one of the best. It taught me the importance of boundaries, of standing up for what I need, and of not letting anyone guilt me into compromising them. I do not regret my choices, even if they were painful. They led me to where I am today, to a place where I can finally move forward. As for my family, I wish them the best, but I do not need them in my life. I have learned that some relationships are not worth saving, and that is just how it is. Not every story needs a happy ending. Sometimes the best thing to do is walk away and focus on building the life you deserve. Comment: I truly hope this story resonated with you and sparked reflection about the relationships in your own life. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is set firm boundaries to protect our peace of mind. It's important to remember that saying no to toxic dynamics does not make you a bad person. Real family isn't always defined by blood, but by the people who show up when life gets hard. Trust is the foundation of any connection, and you have every right to step away when that foundation is broken. Your value is not measured by how much you can endure for the sake of others. Healing often means making difficult choices that prioritize your mental and emotional well-being. You deserve a life filled with people who respect you and support your growth. Never be afraid to choose your happiness over other people's expectations. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.